All right, good evening, class. You are welcome to today's online class about 313. Apology for starting late. I had issue with my network. It wasn't connecting. I got connected with my local provider. It's about 3 weeks. This week making it 4 weeks that we have started this class, animal ecology. We've gone far with it, and as a preview of what we have done, we started with historical background of animal ecology. What we did was to see or understand when and how animal ecology started. After doing that, we went over to ecology of terrestrial animal. We did ecology of terrestrial animal. We look at animals that are found in the terrestrial environment, animals that are found in the aquatic environment. Although your lecture schedules only concentrate on the animals that are found on terrestrial environment. So much needs to be done. Animals that are found on the terrestrial rather than aquatic. So after that, we went over to talk about growth rates and age structure of animal population. The second week of, third week rather, of our online class. To understand what age growth rate is, what are this age structure, looking at population that are declining, stable, and also increasing. Those are points we'll look at. Yes, when we look at growth structure, age structure, and animal population. We also considered factors that regulate these growth. Mention biotic factor and abiotic factor. If I can remember, yes, that's what we will discuss when we were on week 3 of our course. Then last week, not too long, we talked about measurement of population dynamic. That was what we considered last week. We're looking at population patterns that do exist. And we also look at what are the factors that are responsible for these population patterns. Look at exponential pattern, growth, exponential growth pattern, and logistic growth pattern, if I can remember. Yes, that was what we did consider last week in our study. So it was quite interesting, although none of you did showed up class, but you can still look up the link on the online classes that is pasted for you at your leisure time. So for today class, we'll be looking at competition in animals, in organisms, competition in organisms. It's what we shall be considering today. Before we do that, as usual, I have a brief PowerPoint that we want to go through as the lecture goes on. So what I will do right now is for me to upload the PowerPoint that I've already prepared for this class, that all can benefit from it. So without much ado, I want to share the screen now. Okay. All right, so I want to start. Okay, that was an introductory video to our course. Same remain Bao 313. Today's topic will be competition in organisms, and my name still remain Dr. Esenewo Kokwete, and you can get me at esenewo@gmail.com. So, what is competition? What is competition? It's just an interaction between organisms or species in which the fitness of one is lower by the presence of another. Yeah. So such situations, it exists when there's limited supply of at least one resources. It could be food, it could be water, it could be territory, which are used by both, and these are required. Competition, both within species, is important topic in ecology. It's very important when we talk about competition, especially when we look at community ecology. And it's one of many interactive biotic and biotic factors that affect community structures. So when you're talking about population growth or regulations, competition is one of these factors. Competition among members of the same species is not what we know as the intraspecific competition, while competition between individuals of different species is known as interspecific competition. One fact still remains: competition is not always straightforward. It's not something that you think can be defined by one part. It can occur both in a direct and indirect fashion. So That is how complex competition is. And according to the competitive exclusion principle, species less suited to compete for resources should either adapt or these ones die off or they die out. And according to evolutionary theory, this competition within and between species for resources play a critical role in natural selection. Yes, in natural selection, competition is one of the major factors. But however, competition may play less of a role than expansion among larger groups, such as family. So it's difficult for competition to be noted in larger groups as family, but it could easily be seen in species. So, we're talking about types of competition. We have the intraspecific competition, interspecific competition, interference competition, apparent competition, and exploitation competition. I know where our elementary level, what we used to know in competition are just two major types, which are the intraspecific and the interspecific. But now we've gone higher in breaking down other groups of competition that exist. The first is interference. One fact, please, that should be noted in these groups is that the third, the fourth, and the fifth types of competition are defined based by mechanism. Based by mechanism. That is why they are grouped. Okay, take for example the interference competition. This occurs directly between individuals. It could be during aggression, for example, during aggression, when the individual interferes with foraging, survival, reproduction of others, or by directly preventing their physical establishment in a portion of the habitat. See, interference occurs as a result of aggressions where an individual interferes likely with the survival, reproduction, or any other things of the order. That's what we know as interference. Exploitation, this one occurs indirectly through a common limiting resources, which acts as an intermediate. For example, use of resources depletes the amount available to others, and they will now compete for space. So this is what we know as exploitation or exploitative competition. And the last, which is fourth, there, which is apparent, occurs directly between two species which are both preyed upon by the same predator. See? Because when two species are being preyed upon by the same predator. For example, species A and B are both preyed for predator C. The increase of species A will cause the decrease of species B, because the increase of A will increase the number of predator C, which in turn will add more of B. See? That is what we know as the apparent competition. Now we talk like the first two, which I jumped because I needed to explain the other ones that look as if they are new to us. The intraspecific competition. Intraspecific occurs when members of the same species vie for the same resources in an ecosystem. Take for example, two trees going together, they will now compete for light above ground, for water, and also for nutrient in the soil, thereby getting less resources. They will usually perform less well than if they grew by themselves. Although in this situation, it will actually be more useful to think in terms of resources availability than competition. See? Adaptation to such an environment include growing taller, where the specific predictive provided by the computation model is that all species in such situations will grow as tall as possible. Or, or rather, developing a larger root system where the specific prediction is that all species in the system will develop very deep root system. See? So the real question is whether these predictions are evidenced by our observation of the natural world. Sometimes we may predict based on the fact that the physical characteristics of these organisms or plants will now determine how they can outwit the other plants in their environment or compete with them. Then we also talk about the interspecific, because when individuals of two separate species share a limiting resources in the same area. If the resources cannot support both populations, then lowered fecundity, growth, or survival may result in at least one species. See? So interspecific competition has the potential to alter population, communities, and possibly evolution of interacting species. So an example of this is case of cheetah and lion. Since both feed on similar prey, they are negatively impacted by the presence of other because they will have less food. But however, they still persist together despite the prediction that under competition, one would displace the other. Even in fact, lions sometimes steal prey items killed by cheetah. We sometimes see this in documentaries, televisions, and the rest. So potential competitors can also kill each other. And this phenomenon is what we call intragard prediction. Intragard prediction. For example, of this can be seen in Southern California. Coyotes often kill and eat gray foxes and bobcats. All three carnivores share the same prey, which are small mammals. Can imagine the coyote, the gray foxes, and the bobcat all shares the same prey. Competition has been observed between individuals, population, and species, but there's little evidence that competition has been the driving force in evolution of large groups. Yes, it's noted that, or it could be seen that competition do exists or can be observed in a population, but that does not mean that this will influence the evolution of a group. For example, between reptiles and mammals, mammals lived beside reptiles for many millions of years, but they were unable to gain a competitive edge until dinosaurs were devastated by extinction, which we all know. So those are the examples of competitions. Please don't forget intraspecific, interspecific, interference, apparent, and exploitation. So the question we want to ask is, as our class activity 1 is, what is evolutionary strategy? What is evolutionary strategy? What is evolutionary strategy? I'll give you a minute or two for you to do your class activity, please. All right, open you have been able to get something doing. Can we move to our next point? All right, so we mentioned previously that there are factors that are responsible for competition. But then for this class, 3 major points have been mentioned. Actually, if you could remember, we said food, water, and territory are always limited supply in nature because they are being used, they're both used and they are required. So competition both within and between species is an important topic in ecology, as we explained. And because of this, there's always interaction between the biotic and biotic factors. These affect the community structures. So first of the resources that contribute to competition is territory. Territory, yes. We all know that territorial animals defend areas. They obtain a next, dense, or mating sites and sufficient food resources for themselves and their young. And defense really takes the forms of overfights. More usually, there is highly unnoticeable display, which may be visual, and the rest. So examples of territory, as we can see, are classical territory. Under territory, we have classical territory, spraying, and defense. Classical territory, spraying, and defense are under territory. We have sunlight as one of the resources. And lastly, we have water under its chemical and physical properties. And we have the taste and the odor. All right. There are animals that mark their territory. We have dogs and other canids, scent marks by urination and defecation, while cats scent marks by rubbing their faces and flanks against objects. These are different marks that animals use to defend their territory. Even invertebrates are noted to show territorial attitudes. Some ants and bees are typical examples of animals that show territorial defense. When we talk about spraying, which is also known as territorial marking, it's a behavior used by animals to identify their territory. Most commonly, this is scent marking, or that's what we say, scent marking, accompanied by depositing strong smelling chemical, such as urine, at prominent location within the territory. Often, this scent contains carrier proteins, such as the major urine protein, to stabilize the odor and maintain them for a longer time. Animals, dogs, I have a dog in my house, just a typical example of this. Yeah, assuming I take the dog for a walk, what the dog does is to each strategic places, it will just mark it with the urine or marks. And the essence is, in case it comes back, you'll be able to know and note with that smells that he has already taken that route. So that is a typical example of spraying. Defense, yeah. Territories may be held by an individual, a mated pair, or a group, as we know. Then there are territory, such as the blackbirds. They may defend feeding territories that are distant from their net sites, and in some species, they form lakes, for example, or defend the lake sites, which is used only for mating. So there are some animals that defend their territory, maybe for during breeding seasons or for food. This will happen maybe in the winter. They are periodical. Such attitudes are either periodical. It could be when it's winter, or it could be in the morning that these attitude or characteristics are shown. Yeah. The next is sunlight. Yes, sunlight in the broader sense, the total frequency spectrum of electromagnetic radiation given off by the sun. Yes. And on Earth, sunlight is filtered through the Earth atmosphere, and solar radiation is obvious as daylight when the sun is above the horizon. Yes, sunlight may be recorded using a sunshine recorder. Yes, or what they call pyranometer, that is used in measuring sunlight. And when we mention sunlight, what really comes to our mind is plant, because it's one of the key factors in photosynthesis, which is a vital process for life on Earth. So the availability of sunlight also affects, the competitions among plants that are available in that environment. So it's a major factor in competition among species of either same or different. The last is water. Water, just like the common one outstanding musician would say, "Water no get enemy." It's one of the major factor that contributes to competition. Water is not as available as you think, even though the Earth, the landmass of the Earth constitutes about 70% of water. But the accessibility of this water matters so much. Especially in Nigeria, we'll note that not all areas in Nigeria have access to water. There are places that you have to trek miles, kilometers to get water. Yes, so good drinking water, which is essential to human life, it's not that accessible to all. Yes, not accessible to all. That's why there has been sustainable development goals regarding accessibility of good drinking water to the population on Earth. So when we talk about water, there's always need for us to talk about the chemical and the physical properties. So chemical, physical properties, those are the temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, alkalinity, conductivity, salinity, and so on and so forth. These are the properties of water. And these properties have their ranges, have their standard. In animal ecology, there are two standards of water. Now, what I mean by two standards is that there are standard water for aquatic organisms, and there are standard water for good drinking water for humans. See, yes, good drinking water for humans. So that's the standard. But then these standards are either WHO, or they are, depending on the country. I think for Nigeria, we still have under the Federal Ministry of Environment, formerly Federal, now Ministry of Environment, we have standards and ranges for these parameters. And these physical chemical parameters determine the competition, because if water chemical and physical parameters are within the range, it means that the organisms will compete for these resources. And since they are scarce, the available ones, the survival of the fittest comes in, and the ones that can obtain this water will take it all. Taste and odor, water that has a taste would not be quite conducive for human consumption. even a water that has odor too will never be conducive for human consumption. So these are major factors that contribute to competition. And a water that is tasteless and odorless means that such water will be highly competed for. So that is what we'll look at, resources that contribute to competition. Second, on the class activity, it's explain the differences in spraying and defense in competition. It looks as if they are same, but I want the class to be able to look at the differences that are noted in spraying and defense mechanism in competition. I'll be giving you guys a minute or two for you to do that. Anybody in the class, please? Has anybody joined us? All right. Right, so we've been able to see, we're able to learn rather, resources that contribute to competition. We've seen different types of competition. We have two major, but then it has been extended to 5. And these 3 different types of competition, the other 3 which are by mechanism, we've also noted them. We'll look at the factors and we also understand what competitive exclusion principles is all about. So I hope you guys have been able to enjoy this class. And that concludes. Thank you for listening and for your time. And as usual, we want to conclude with time. All right. So we're back to our class. It's been a lovely evening. For some weeks now, no student have come up to join the class. Just hope by next week, this will be possible. Next week, we'll be looking at population in animal ecology. For then, hopefully, be able to prepare the PowerPoint and upload on the site for you to look at. It's been a nice evening. Thank you for your time. Hope to see you guys next week. My name still remains Dr. Sinawimen Opete. I'm your facilitator for this course. Thank you.